I will again reconvene the February 21st, 2008 Santa Barbara City Planning Commission meeting, returning to our item number 3, which is I've lost my agenda. Here. Thank you. It's an appeal by Tony Fisher of the application of T-Mobile for Thomas Thompson, 3230 State Street.
Sure.
And the appeal is by Tony Fisher and Friends of Outer State Street. Thank you. I'm going to try to hunt mine down. Staff ready to start?
If we started now, you wouldn't have any visuals, and that wouldn't be very helpful, I don't think. So, could you give us another 5 or 10 minutes? Thanks.
5
Sorry.
Really? Okay. Apologies to you, to those at home.
Mr. Chair, do we have reports from liaisons that we could use to
Good idea.
take at this time?
Well, we don't have a secretary. Ms. Rodriguez, we're going to proceed with our administrative agenda. Liaison reports. Anybody have a liaison report? No liaison reports. How about staff hearing officer? Nothing from the staff hearing officer? And I'll close that portion of our...
Take another 5 minutes.
It's a really cool setup when it works. Yeah. Well, one thing that this does that the overhead doesn't do is that you don't have to just do transparencies. So this is very cool in that respect. It's showing up on the monitor over here, so it should be getting there. Oh, it took a picture of Danny. That's what it did.
Okay, ready to go? Staff presentation to be given by, which would Roxanne? Okay. Okay, thank you.
The project site is a 15,000 square foot commercial site located on State Street.
Hold on 1 second. The degree of our technical difficulties are astounding today.
Let's try this. Better? Okay.
There we go. Thank you.
Again, the project site is a 15,000 square foot commercial lot with frontage out on State Street here, commercial building with its parking here on the right, also fronting onto Kai Alamo, and then the alley that runs behind the lease spaces. The proposed project involves the installation of cellular antenna equipment and a new trash storage enclosure area to be located in the back. Because the property is located in the SD2, Special District 2 Overlay District, there are 20-foot setbacks off both street frontages. This project was seen by the modification hearing officer on October 21st, where she approved the installation of an equipment enclosure and a trash enclosure at the rear of the property. This approval was appealed by the Friends of Upper State Street on the basis that their belief is in the SD2 zone, no modifications for front yard encroachments should be supported. It's staff's position today, as it was during the previous reviews, that this portion of this lot functions as a rear yard for the property, where accessory or storage, trash receptacles would be an appropriate location. The staff hearing officer approved a trash enclosure looking much like this. During further review, it was determined that the area would be too small to accommodate the number of receptacles, both trash, recycling, and green waste matter, that was being generated by the site. So a different trash enclosure was proposed 2 months later in December. This accommodated the number of trash receptacles. However, transportation staff felt there were safety issues related when leaving the back of the property here onto both the alley and Kai Alamo, kind of a busy area right near the intersection of Las Positas and State. The applicant then redesigned to put that trash enclosure along the back of the equipment storage area in this area. Now, this particular design included only one way to empty the receptacles out through this area. It has been determined that that is not really an appropriate design, in that if there was green matter waste day and those cans were in the back of the enclosure, all the cans would have to be pulled out. They may not be replaced. Just problems with the overall design. So the applicant has asked for an opportunity to rethink and redesign the trash enclosure, very possibly being this size or maybe one can larger, with large carriage doors on the back that would open out on the private property and would allow elimination of the particular cans on their particular days. The project is still subject to Architectural Board of Review due to alterations being proposed in a tower element. That's going to be a proposed installation for the antennas. It's still in the process of review. The applicant has asked that the antenna changes or the roof changes that are going to incorporate the new antennas come as a package with the equipment in the back here, the equipment storage area, and the trash storage area. So we had asked for a continuance of this item to allow the applicant an opportunity to come up with a new design, go back to the Architectural Board of Review to get comments, and then bring that before the commission. That request for the continuance was denied, so staff is asking today to review the project that will look something like this. The amount of encroachment could be determined, and then working with the design review board to get a design that provides the needs of the applicant, but not intensifying the amount of the encroachment that you could approve, is what staff is recommending. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Milazzo. The appellate, does anybody have any questions for staff at this time? Mr. Thompson?
I have a question for staff. One of the reasons that all this is consolidated at the rear of the building was, I think it was brought out in one of the reports, I can't put my finger on it right now, that there's not enough room in the parking area to put the trash enclosure over there. Has this parking study been done? Do we know how many parking spaces are required? How many are needed? Was there any kind of a demand study done? It's just been assumed that we need all the parking spaces, therefore we can't put the trash enclosure on that side.
Yes, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Thompson, I can pull the approved plans. I know that the parking is conforming. Relocating the trash enclosure into any of the other areas on this site would not either eliminate parking spaces or restrict their maneuvering area.
Right, I understand that. That's the reason for my question. Suppose the trash enclosure did take a parking space. What impact is that going to have? Has that been investigated?
It has not.
Okay, thank you.
Does the appellant have a presentation?
Good afternoon. My name is Tony Fisher. I'm here on behalf of Friends of Outer State Street, and thank you for agreeing to go forward with this hearing so that we can attempt to deal with it and come up with a decision related to the matter that we appealed. And unfortunately, being an appellant, we're not in a position to redesign a project and bring it to you. We're only here to decide whether the project that was approved by the modification hearing officer should be sustained on appeal or reversed. And that's all we can really do in this environment. And that's why one of the main reasons we wanted to bring it to an end. I also want to make a point that we don't have any burden of proving anything at this hearing. It's the burden on the applicant to justify a modification of a zoning regulation. Zoning regulations exist to protect neighbors and the neighborhood and the public. They are not just there to be used or misused or changed merely because a particular property owner would like to use the property in a different way than the zoning regulations allow. With that in mind, when you look at this project and start thinking about what is it, and you can't separate the tower from the enclosure in the back because they go together. You don't need one without the other. They are tied together. The property owner is basically intensifying the use of the property. He now has 3 tenants, and he wants number 4. There has never been any information presented to show why he cannot put this tenant within his property, within the building envelope that exists in this zone. He might not have as much space for one of his other tenants, but that's strictly a financial decision. It has nothing to do with a need for him to violate a front yard. And if you have been reading the various staff reports and the staff recommendations, you will find that there is a concept floating in the mind of the staff hearing officer that this front yard on Calle Alamo is somewhat less important than the front yard on State Street. Considering it's adjacent to a residential zone, it is probably more important than the other front yard, significantly more important, because adjacent to residential zones, and in residential zones we put a high value on our front yards. And protecting property owners across the street from commercial. It was one of the reasons the SD2 zone was put in place. The other was to prevent increases of intensity of use. And that's what's taking place here. They're trying to have less open space, less open yard than required. If you have been following the various staff reports and the staff hearing officer decision, you would find that the findings have routinely made reference to the fact we are getting something better. We are removing an existing building and building something that will look better. Now, that logic stopped when it was pointed out that the building that is there, that shed on the back, is illegal and has been known to be illegal since 1997. And due to a series of mix-ups or people just forgetting about the situation, it has continued to exist. We should be looking at this site with the back of that building totally vacant. There shouldn't be any use there. And that should be an open yard, and then you would see this site very differently. And the staff hearing officer would have seen it differently. The only justification that the staff hearing officer had was that it was removing an existing building. The staff hearing officer was totally unaware that the existing building was illegal. Although the staff, in doing a plan check for this project, found out that it was illegal and noted it in the reports. But none of the staff reports that went to the staff hearing officer or to you or to any of the reports to ABR in a year and a half ever mentioned that the building was illegal. We heard the phrase earlier today, slam dunk. Now, considering the fact that the applicant is being represented by engineers and architects and planners that are typically from out of town, the only way they would have been led to believe that this could be a slam dunk would be if staff gave that indication. And the staff that gave that indication gave it based on not having all of the facts. The proposed findings that have been brought to you suggest that it's an appropriate improvement of utilizing the rear portion of the lot for storage. When have we ever said that a front yard is an appropriate place for storage? That's an enforcement problem that exists all the time. And maybe I should point out that if you look through the street file for this address, you will find probably 8 enforcement letters. This site has had a series of put up an illegal sign, it's up, there's a complaint, there's then an application, and it just is a reoccurring cycle. This property owner had a duty when the staff was operating on the false understanding of the legality of the building to stand up and say, don't use that as a justification. It's not a proper justification because the building is illegal. But that never came forward, either from staff or from the applicant, and both were in a position to know. As you know, the ABR has trashed this project. They have not approved any of these designs in the back because every design that has come in gets different comments about why they don't like it. And you can look through all of those ABR comments, and that's one of the flaws of our communication system between boards. You don't see what they saw with those comments. So, and typically, those comments and notes and information coming forward are very incomplete. You have been handed draft minutes from the last meeting of the ABR. There's a straw vote in there. There was a second straw vote. unanimous, we will not approve the tower at the height at which it is proposed. This was after they were told in no uncertain terms that it could not be lowered and would not be lowered. They couldn't lower it. That had been put in writing to the staff and was said to the ABR in clear terms. And so the ABR said unanimously, we aren't going to approve it at this height.
Could you move to wrap up?
And with that, there is no appropriate improvement here. There are no basis for invading a front yard, as they are requesting that you do. And besides that, you can't allow a project that nobody wants to build to get a modification. You know, the staff hearing officer made a mistake based on bad facts. Now, the staff seems to keep trying to recycle those same bad facts in a different way, but it's still the same bad logic. You can't use front yards adjacent to residential just because I can get a fourth tenant onto the property and intensify the use. Question was asked about parking. We don't even have in this presentation, the staff report, I don't think we even have a calculation of the size of the existing buildings. It's not there. The parking was going to be restriped in 1998. So is it conform? Does this new tower, which is 6 by 6, 7 feet tall, does that require additional parking space? None of that analysis has been done. Our recommendation is you grant the appeal, deny this project, and let the applicant come back through without all of this garbage standing in the way, if they think they can come up with an approvable project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Mr. Kahan wants to make a couple comments.
I believe we have him here as public comment. Well, hold on a sec.
He is the president of FOSS.
All right. Can I give this back then? Because I don't want him to.
I want to make several real quick points. One, I've given you a letter that described this project as 6 antennas under that cover and also 6 cabinets that were going to be installed. Part of that submittal that you don't have is this one sheet here with the backside too from RBS, and these are massive cabinets. And the point I want to emphasize, this transmission equipment is inextricably interwoven with the antenna. They can't be separated. It's all in one. They eliminate the modification for the antenna, but this is here. On that picture that's up there right now is one of the plans. If you look at the one on the right, upper right, you can see the tower that it's non-existent that they want to put on this building. In my mind, it's an ugly building. They're going to make it uglier. Anyway, I'm the president of Friends of Outer State Street and the Grove Lane Area Neighborhood Association. This woman who teaches, who has a school there, right next to the transformers and below the antenna, has protested this in a letter. I think it's called the Kumon Learning Center. I think you have I hope you have a copy of it. 2 of the neighbors, when in 2006, I thought this thing was over at the ABR. Commissioner Bartlett was there that time. It was very negative, what was said at that time. And I think Teresa Sandifer was there. She has little children, next door neighbor. You have 2 letters in there from neighbors in the area, adjacent on Kay Alamo, don't want to look at this. One of them is a city councilman in Citrus Heights, and he wrote it on a city letterhead. Why, I don't know. And also, the Citizens Planning Association, I think it got in your file, adopted a motion to oppose this project and asked that there be enforcement on this. It would have been nice if you had a clean tablet here, the site was cleared, it was legal, they come into you then and you start at step 1. And I can't explain why it's gone on since then. But we urge you not to grant this modification here because it's inappropriate for the site and it's adjacent to residential neighborhoods which we're very involved in. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? No. Mr. White.
Well, just in general, their staff report says that the structure in the back is illegal, but it suggests, or at least I am led to believe, whether or not it suggests, that it did get a permit, but then the permit wasn't final. Is that the case?
Chair Myers, Commissioner White, a project was approved through the Design Review Board, and a permit was issued at the time of the original construction. The archive plans don't show that the structure was constructed exactly how it was supposed to be. Okay. It was never inspected, therefore it did expire. So right. The staff's position is the building is illegal, but that this project will get rid of the illegal construction and replace
I understand that, but my question is, and what I just heard you say is that the building was not built, the structure was not built according to plan.
Correct.
So that was the first error that occurred.
Correct.
And then that structure was not signed off, so the city didn't catch that it was not built to plan.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Bartlett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have another question for staff. Probably Danny Cato would be the best to answer it. And I know that there's a proposal going through the ordinance committee now on changing the front setback requirements on properties that have multiple frontages. Can you enlighten us a little bit on maybe where that's at least going in terms of the thinking?
Yes. Does this work? Yes?
Yep. Just have to speak up. It's a little
okay.
weak today.
Commissioner Myers, sorry, Chair Myers, Commissioner White, Bartlett, sorry. It wouldn't affect this at all, first of all. The proposal that's going through is to allow, if you have what we call a through lot, two front yards opposite each other, two street frontages opposite each other, then we would allow open yard to be counted in the secondary front yard, but building setbacks would stay the same.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay. Does the applicant have anything to add?
Yeah, actually a couple of things.
Why don't you stand up here? If you could identify yourself for the record.
My name's Carl Forster, and I am a local. I live here in Santa Barbara, and I use State Street all the time, go to Chuck's. It's my favorite place for steak. One thing I did want to reiterate that hasn't brought up, when we started this project, I went down and pulled the original set of plans for when it was first built. It was the House of Pie back in 1971 or something like that. The original trash enclosure is approved back in that corner, in that same encroachment area, and I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I will now open up public comment for this item. We have two speakers, Scott Zandifer and Jennifer Zandifer. Mr. Zandifer.
Thanks for your time. We're 18 Chi Alamo. We're, if you show the transparency again, we're in the little corner. See where it says Alamo in the corner there. We're the closest neighbors to this this front yard. And even though it's on part of the alley, it's definitely a front yard. All the houses across from it and us have to look at that every day. It's not in the alley at all. It's definitely right on the curb too. There's no setback whatsoever. The cinder blocks are this close to the curb, and we oppose this because we don't like this tower either. I mean, it looks terrible. The building already is not a nice building. I mean, we'll give you that, but we don't need to make it worse than it is now with this tower, and we're over the setback already. It's illegal back there, we believe, and we don't want to look at it from our front yard. And our neighbors who, I was walking down the street yesterday, and I said, hey, you guys going to the meeting tomorrow? And they said, no, it's been postponed. And I didn't even find out about this meeting until a half hour before I got here. So I don't know how that happened, but I mean, I'm not surprised that we're not represented here today, because all my neighbors don't think this is happening right now. So, I mean, you know, keep that in mind. Some of us would have been here. Some more of my neighbors that I've talked to, at least 3 of them, would have been here with me if they had known that they could speak today. So it is a front yard. If it had been up the alley another 50 feet, it would be in the alley and no one would see it. But, you know, we're all looking at that every day. Well, that's all we want to say.
Thank you. Jennifer Sandifer? Sandifer?
Thank you very much. My concern is, yes, I have 2 children. They attend Peabody School, which is 2 blocks away, San Roque School, a block away, at Kumon, which is a tutorial school in the building that they want to put the tower into. I'm just concerned on an environmental impact level. How many studies have been done as to that tower being 50 yards from my children's bedroom and 2 blocks from my children's school? So that's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission for...
Could I have 1 minute to clarify something?
Okay.
It has to do with Mr. White's question. I also pulled the drawings the same day you did your site visit. And what I saw was the original House of Pies. And then I saw in 1997 enforcement action to remove the storage shed on the back of the property, which was there illegally enclosed. That is what is there now. And as a result of the enforcement action, the property owner took out a building permit and got approval of drawings to tear down what is currently there and to build a smaller enclosure, which would include the trash enclosure, which is, you didn't see it when you were on the site visit, but it's inside that shed. It's still there with concrete walls inside. So they got a permit to tear down what is there and to put something smaller. And I note that it didn't go through the typical SD2 review because it violated setback then. So it slipped through. But they never built anything. They didn't build out what they got approval for in 1997. They left what was there, never called for any inspections because they weren't building. And so what you have there now is what was there in 97 that was the subject of the enforcement action. I thought I had made that really clear. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
We're clear on that.
Okay. So
your 60 seconds is up.
all right. One of our letters also cited that the negative declaration doesn't work, or the categorical exemption that they're relying on doesn't work in this project.
Thank you. Ms. Hubble.
Yeah, one thing I would like to say, and I end up having to say this every time we deal with any project that involves a cell tower, is that we have been excluded from being able to deal with whatever electromagnetic field might develop from that. That right has been reserved to the federal government, so we can only deal with the aesthetic effects of the construction that's involved with whatever tower and so on. And of course, in this case, we've also got the modification to deal with.
Okay. With that, I'll bring it back to the commission. Mr. Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll start things out. I've looked at this project. I've reviewed the staff report, and I cannot make the findings for the modification because it's not clear to me that the request is necessary, not desirable, but necessary for an appropriate development of the property. So I would be favoring to uphold the appeal, and if any future project comes back, I'm going to be gauging my support or opposition to that project on the basis of it not being proposed that it would exacerbate any of the encroachment problems that we already have. I think just going any farther into that setback line is just doesn't work for me. So I'm in favor of the granting the appeal.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Mr. Joseph pretty well said where I am coming from also. I would uphold the appeal. I can't make the finding that it's necessary for an appropriate improvement, and I would suggest, since this is going through a redesign, we were told, that maybe we look a little more in depth as to other possible solutions if the applicant wants to put it on that site. As I said, let's look at the square footage that already exists in the building. Let's look at the parking area and see if we need all of the parking, or could we put part of the potential encroachment over there. But as it stands right now, I don't see any justification for approving the modification.
Thank you. Mr. Bartlett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If staff could maybe put up the prior site plan that indicated the setback lines. I agree with Commissioner Jostes. I'm not going to be able to make the findings for that setback encroachment on Calle Alamo, especially in light of the fact that this project has 2 front yard setbacks and it already encroaches totally on the front setback on State Street. To have encroachments on both ends, I think, is really excessive. I would be looking for any subsequent application that comes forward to also clearly deal with the abatement of the existing violations. I don't want to be looking at a new proposal that still carries forward prior issues that have been identified. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. White?
I agree with my colleagues.
Mr. White, would you like to move into a motion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I move we uphold the appeal.
Second.
First by Mr. Jostes and a second.
Based on the logic that the findings of necessity to grant the appeal and the finding that this is an appropriate development of the site cannot be made.
And a second by Mr. Thompson. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries 5-0. This is appealable to City Council within 10 days. And with that, we are adjourned.